Hello, I'm John Denny with the Telos Corporation, and I'm here to present to you another episode of Xacta Tidbits. In this episode, we'll take a look at the Control Fields Memorandum. In this memorandum, the 16th Air Force Authorization Official has clarified some of the artifacts that should be uploaded inside of Xacta. These artifacts are supporting documentation for the body of evidence. The one thing that the documentation within this memorandum does not discuss is the specific areas where each one of these items should be placed within Xacta. What we're going to do in this episode is we're going to break down the memorandum and we're going to begin to show where each of these items should be placed within Xacta. As you can see listed on the screen is the memorandum for distribution on the population of Xacta control fields. This memorandum is dated 17 February of 2022. Section 1 tells us that the purpose of this memo is to amend and clarify Air Force Intelligence Community Policy pertaining to the population of the Xacta tool used to track all projects through the RMF process. There is an enabling of the level of automation expected by the operational environment and by OD&I, as well as to reduce the number of independent data calls that exist. In section number 2, we see that in addition to populating the Xacta fields, uploading artifacts such as supporting documentation for verification and human review is normally done using what we call the paperclip icon, if it is available within the relevant Xacta process step. Now, for those of you who've worked with Xacta before, we know that the paperclip icon is not always available for a particular process step. Therefore, it addresses that by saying if there is no icon available, you should place that directly into the Manage Project Artifacts process step. We are now presented with a table that lists all the common required documentation. We have a boundary diagram, a data flow diagram, a privileged user SOP, an ISM-ISO appointment letter, the SSO-SSR appointment letter, the construction of SCIF facilities that were built after 2010, any current SCIF accreditation letters, any current Tempest accreditation letters, a DD 254 for every contractor SCIF location, the PDS approval, any relevant CONOP or SOPs, an emergency action plan, the physical security SOP, the approved software CTF, and finally, the approved security impact analysis or SIA. We see here in paragraph number 3 that compliance with the memorandum is mandatory. Because this is a mandatory item, and because all of these items here are listed as things that should be populated within inside of Xacta 360, we need to learn where each of these items should go within Xacta. After some discussion with our delegated authorization officials, there was a determination made on where the best place to put each of these documents. Here is a list of all the documentation and where the best place is for it to go within Xacta. We have our boundary diagram and data flow diagram, which will just be paperclipped directly to their appropriate steps, the boundary diagram and data flow diagram steps. Our privileged user SOP, ISM-ISO appointment letter, and SSO-SSR appointment letter will all be paperclipped inside of project personnel. Our construction security plan for any new SCIF that was built after 2010, our current SCIF accreditation letter, our current Tempest accreditation letter, any DD254s for every contractor skip location, and the PDS approval will all be paperclipped inside of the system environment process step. The relevant CONOP and SOPs will be paperclipped in controls implementation under whichever appropriate control set contains or pertains to those CONOPs and SOPs. We also have the emergency action plan, which is just going to be placed directly inside of managed project artifacts. We have our physical security SOP, which will also be paperclipped inside of the system environment step, along with the previous items that were placed within the system environment process step. The approved software CTF will be paperclipped inside of managed software. And finally, our approved SIA, which would normally happen during our continuous monitoring, is going to be paperclipped inside of relevant change report and attach SIA process step. Now that we have an idea of where everything should be going inside of Xacta, let's take a look at the proper process steps in order to upload or paperclip our items inside of Xacta so that they can be properly viewed by our delegated authorization officials so that they can make a proper risk determination on our project. Inside of Xacta 360, I'm presented with my projects. For this particular explanation of where to place the documents inside of our memorandum inside Xacta, we're just going to use our Xacta Tidbits project. Inside of my Xacta Tidbits project, I'm presented with my different major tasks. In this particular situation, my active task is actually information system and environment changes, or in the AFIC, we like to call this continuous monitoring. From continuous monitoring, I can actually upload all of my documentation that is required for all of the support documents in our body of evidence. However, you can upload your documentation at any time for the appropriate process steps as you're walking through your project. We will show the proper places to place each one as you're walking through the project at the end of the video. For now, we will stick with the information system and environment changes. Inside of information system and environment changes, I am listed as an ISM, or Information System Security Manager. That is my default role. From here, I can choose where I would like to upload my documentation. For the system boundary diagrams, which is our very first diagram and documentation to upload, I'm simply going to click on my system boundary diagram process step. I can see that I have a properly placed system boundary diagram, but I have not paperclipped anything in. I can tell that there's nothing paperclipped or attached to this process step because the number of attachments is listed as 0. There are no attachments according to our pop-up. So we're going to go ahead and click on our paperclip icon. We are now presented with our artifact list, and we can click our plus button to add an artifact. As you can see, the pop-up shows us when we hover over the plus, new artifact. Once I'm on the new artifact, I can then choose which file I would like to upload. In this case, I'm going to be uploading my sample Xacta 360 Training Network system boundary diagram. This is the system boundary diagram step, and this would be the appropriate diagram to upload or attach for this particular step. Now that I have chosen my particular file, I can type in any description that I would like. In this case, we'll just type in system boundary diagram for supporting documentation. If I need to classify my document, I can always click the Classify Markings button here. I am then allowed to go through and add classifications such as unclassified, confidential, secret, or top secret. Depending on which classification that I choose and set, I may be able to see disseminations, SCI control systems, special access programs, and other additional markings as required. We're going to go ahead and just set this as unclassified. As you can see, the additional disseminations have shown up here on the side for things like for official use only, no foreign, and others. Now that I've set my classification, I can click the Save button. We notice now that I have my file, I have my description, and I have my classification set. Once all of these things have been set, I am now ready to click my Save button. Now we have a properly uploaded system boundary diagram in our system boundary diagram step. I can now click the Close button. As you notice, the number has now gone from 0 to 1, indicating that we have one attachment for this process step. We are now ready to move on to our next diagram that we need to upload. In this case, that will be the data flow diagram. Our data flow diagram will be from our system data flow diagram step. Once again, we've already got a properly placed in here system data flow diagram, but again, we have no attachments. So we need to properly attach a file. Using the previous steps, we're just going to follow right along, choose the appropriate file to upload, such as our data flow diagram file. We'll give it a classification. And we'll give it a description, such as data flow diagram for supporting documentation. Once I've got everything set here, I can again click my Save button, and my sample data flow diagram has been saved and properly paperclipped into this process step. I can tell because I have a 1 here listed next to it. The next documentation that we will be uploading is going to be for our project personnel. So we need to find our project personnel step, which is listed here. As you can see, we have several project personnel listed here. But again, we have no supporting documentation. There are no attachments. This is where we would then use the paperclip icon again for project personnel, and we would attach all the supporting documentation. In case you can't remember what the supporting documentation is, the supporting documentation for this process step will be your privileged user SOP, your ISM/ISO appointment letter, your SSO/SSR appointment letter. These are the 3 things that would need to be populated inside of your project personnel area. So make sure that you follow the same steps as before to upload your particular letters for this process step. Once you're done uploading your documentation, and we'll just upload a file, any file, just to show that the documentation is uploaded or that there is some type of documentation uploaded. We'll assume that this is a ISM/ISO appointment letter. Appointment letter for supporting documentation. Again, I can classify my document and I can save it. Now I have one ISM appointment letter for supporting documentation. Again, my attachment count has increased to 1. Your attachment count, if you've properly loaded up all of your documentation that is required, may go anywhere from 1 or higher, depending on how much documentation that you have to upload. The next on our list is to upload things into our system environment. Inside of system environment, we notice that we have one system here inside of this particular project. Its location is Lackland. Again, we have no supporting documentation. There's no artifacts. In system environment, we need to add in our construction security plan for a new SCIF that was built after 2010, any current SCIF accreditation letters, any current Tempest accreditation letters, and our DD 254 for every contractor SCIF location, our PDS approval, and also anything for our physical security SOPs. All of that documentation will end up being paperclipped to this particular step. Once again, following the same procedures, you will just attach each one of the artifacts using the paperclip and the plus icon. The next one is for controls implementation. This one is a little bit more complicated. Within controls implementation, we are presented with several different controls that we could be working with within Xacta that we have implemented for our project. Depending on what our SOP is or what our CONOP is that we're working with will be determining on which process or which particular control set that we would like to put this paperclipped icon to. Underneath the control set, we would need to find the appropriate control set for the CONOP. Let's assume that our CONOP is for something such as configuration management. So we're going to type in configuration, and we're going to search for configuration. When we look through here, we see that we have the CM1A1 here, configuration management policies and procedures. For this particular one, I'm simply going to click on the major process or the major control. Once this control is up, I have the ability to now add an artifact for it. As you notice, there are no artifacts that are attached for this particular process or procedure. Again, we will click on the paperclip icon. We will then click the plus button, and then we would add the file with the description and classification for this particular process step. So we'll assume that we are going to upload our documentation here, and we'll say that this is a configuration management CONOP for supporting documentation. We can classify the document again by clicking the classify button, choosing the appropriate level of classification, and then saving it. Again, we have our file, our supporting documentation, and our classification. We can click the save button, and here is our documentation. We can now click the close button, and as you can see, there is one attachment for this particular control set. Now the question would come up, what happens if you have a CONOP or an SOP that covers multiple control sets all at the same time? If you have a documentation that that works with multiple control sets at the same time, you would want to paperclip it directly to the controls implementation step, knowing that it is going to cover multiple controls. However, when you do have a document that is for a very specific control set, like we did with configuration management, you would need to click inside of that particular one and then attach the artifact as we did before. Again, if we need to do multiple controls with one document, we would attach it directly to controls implementation. The next area that we would work with is our approved software CTF. And your approved software CTF is going to go inside of managed software. As you're listing through all of your software, what is approved and what is not approved, the applications and everything that your particular system will be using, again, we have the paperclip icon. As we can see, there are no attachments to managed software. This is where we would attach our approved software CTF letter. Using the same process as before, clicking the new artifact, we would classify, add a description, and then we would make sure that we save our file in here, and then we can close it. Once that's been uploaded, our number from 0 would change to 1 or more, depending on how many different CTFs that we would need to upload. But that is the process step where we would see this. Next would be our approved SIAs. All of your approved SIAs are going to go inside of our relevant change report and attach SIA. As you can see, there is already an approved relevant change report that is in here. So there was a relevant change for an operating system update. It has an SIA number, the description, who made the change, and when the change was made. There's also already supporting documentation that has been attached. We can see this because there is one attachment. Every time that there is a relevant change or an SIA that has been approved, we would then just click our paperclip icon and we would attach our new SIA. In this case, we've already attached a sample security impact analysis for the approved SIA number 1 that implemented our operating system update. If we needed to add more SIAs, we could simply click the plus button to add a new artifact. Once we've added the new artifact, we've created the classifications, we could then save it and click close. In order to document the change, we would simply click the plus button and we would walk through and document the change that has been made. So we have attached our SIA and we would need to document that the change has happened. The last portion is we have to be able to place documentation in places where we just don't have this paperclip icon. We get asked quite often, how do we get to a place where I can just attach any artifact into my project that maybe does not have a paperclip icon step? The answer to that question is we're going to use the Manage Project Artifacts process step. Within our tasks, we're going to look at all of our major tasks. Inside of your major tasks, there are certain tasks that are always open within the workflow templates for the AFIC. As an ISM or an ISO or PM or ISI, the process step is going to be general information. This is the major task that you want to be in. Inside of here, we notice that there is a Manage Project Artifacts step. Inside of Manage Project Artifacts, we can click here and we can see all of our artifacts that have been uploaded. We can also see everything that we have just recently uploaded, such as our data flow diagram for supporting documentation, our ConOp for supporting documentation, our appointment letter. We also notice that next to these that were paper clipped we see that there is a link. When we click on this, it's going to tell us exactly where this is listed. It tells me that this ConOp is listed as a requirement next for the CM1.A.1 Configuration Management Policy and Procedures. Anything that is blue within Xacta is a clickable step. If we click on these, we can then open up this particular step and we can look through here and we can see what is Configuration Management Policy and Procedures. But we know now that this is exactly where this particular document has been attached. And we can do the same for other documentation, such as our ISO-ISM appointment letter. If we click on the link here, we notice that it has been attached to the process step project personnel. Our SIA has been in the relevant change report and attach SIA. At any time during your project, if you have an SIA that has been approved for a change to your project, you'll notice that underneath general information, we have the relevant change report and attach SIA process step. This step is always open. It is always open for any ISM, ISO, PM, ISI to get to underneath the major task of general information. So at any time, if you need to, you do not have to be inside of continuous monitoring to attach a relevant change or an SIA. You can simply do it right here. As your project is moving along and going forward, there are process steps or major tasks within Xacta that we need to look at of where you would place this documentation as you are going forward. We're going to look at all the process steps. All the major tasks within Xacta are now viewed just by choosing View by Status, Show All, even though these process steps are already completed. As you are working through your project, you're going to be starting with security categorization. Inside security categorization, we have the project personnel step. Inside project personnel is where we would attach the documentation that we would need for our privileged user SOP, our ISO-ISM appointment letters, and other appointment letters for other project personnel. Moving along, we would see that we have the system environment step. Inside the system environment step, this is where we would also attach any of our documentation for our SCIF, for our SCIF accreditations, any Tempest accreditations, any PDS approval, or any DD-254s for contractor SCIF locations. We also notice that we have the system boundary diagram that is listed here. Inside of our system boundary diagram, we would upload our documentation here. Again, this is as though we have started our project from the very beginning. The next steps that we will look at are going to be inside of our information system description. Inside of information system description, we also have the project personnel and system environment. So if you forgot to put your documentation in during security categorization, you can always put them in again during information system description underneath your project personnel and your system environment. But we also see here is where our managed software step is, where we can attach our artifacts for all of our approved software CTFs. If you forgot to put your system boundary diagram in during system or security categorization, you would be able to do so now. We also have the system data flow diagram, where we would attach our system data flow diagram, and that would complete our step in all of the process areas where we could put in things for our project for this part. Within our task list, again, the one that is kind of missing from everything so far is been controls implementation. Controls implementation is going to be underneath one of your control implementation tasks, major tasks. It may be critical control implementation, or it may just be under regular security control implementation, depending on whether you go through the normal QTT process or standard QTT or QTT Express. Inside controls implementation is where all of my controls are listed as before. I could then scroll or use my search feature over here in order to find a particular control set that I was looking to attach a ConOp or SOP to, just as before. Again, all of our documentation within Xacta is going to end up inside of Manage Project Artifacts. Again, this is underneath General Information. This process step will always be open, should never be closed. Underneath Manage Project Artifacts, here are all of my uploaded documentation with the links next to them, the dates that they were uploaded, and more. That concludes showing you where all of our documentation should go within Xacta per the memorandum. As you can see, Xacta makes it easy to paperclip all of your supporting documentation for the body of evidence per the memorandum. Remember that all of this documentation is mandatory and must be placed inside of Xacta 360 so that the authorization officials can make the proper risk decision. Thank you again for watching our video, and I hope to see you around the 16th Air Force and the AFIC. For more great content, make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel to get the latest Xacta tidbits.